Hello, terraces. Nice to see everyone out there. We'll get started with this. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We are going to talk about resiliency. Resiliency. This is a fascinating topic, something that's a little near and dear to my heart. And we're going to go over why resiliency is one of the most important factors to aging well. So, why am I talking about this? Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Ben Chateau. I am a physical therapist by training. I've been a physical therapist since 2004. Presently, I'm the administrator of Signature Healthcare. We have house calls, home health, palliative, and hospice care. So it covers the gamut there. I'm also founder and editor of a website called the physicaltherapyadvisor.com, thephysicaltherapyadvisor.com. And it's a website dedicated to help proactive adults of all ages understand how to safely self-treat and manage common musculoskeletal, neurologic, and mobility-related conditions. My practice has always been more orthopedic-based and exercise-based, and primarily has focused on the active aging adult. So I've spent most of my career working with the aging adult in different capacities and different levels, from 30 years old to my oldest being 103 years old. So I've really seen the gamut when it comes to that. I have a doctorate of physical therapy from Idaho State University and a bachelor's in science degree or health science degree from Boise State University, and I minored in gerontology, which is the study of aging. So you can see for a very long time, I have been interested in the human experience when it relates to aging, and then that lifespan of aging, particularly on the physical side, which is why I went into physical therapy way back when. So let's get into this, right? So what is resiliency? It is a very interesting topic, and there's lots of aspects to this, but defined for us today is resiliency is defined as an object's ability to return to its original form or position after being bent, compressed, or stretched. So when this definition is applied to a person, it kind of gives us a clue as to why some people will recover very quickly after injury or illness, and others are going to linger a little bit or maybe not recover, right? And we're going to discuss why that is, and more importantly, how can you change that, right? How can you become more resilient? That's the key for us. So we have to remember that in humans, it's not just about the physical, right? It's the whole being that we need to talk about here. So emotionally, mentally, socially, and spiritually all come together in how they affect us physically. Now, today's discussion is definitely about the physical portion of how to be resilient, but we cannot ignore the fact that these other types of resiliency, emotional, mental, social, and spiritual, have very, very important ramifications to how we respond physically and just how we respond as a total human, right? We can't ignore those things. But today we're going to focus on that physical part of it. So each characteristic of human resiliency definitely impacts the other, right? The physical impacts the social impacts the physical, or vice versa. And kind of understanding the interplay of the five really helps us get that whole big picture of who that person is, right? Because everybody's different in how we relate and handle certain circumstances, illnesses, injuries, surgery, whatever it might be, right? So it's all handled a little bit different. And then the patterns of resiliency in others can really offer valuable clues on how we can all be more resilient. So that's the goal, because more resiliency equals better aging. And the goal here is healthy aging, right? A long lifespan does not matter if you don't have a good health span, right? So you can live a really long time, but if you're really unhealthy that whole time, that's not good. We want a long lifespan with a really long health span, and that's how we become resilient, or resiliency impacts that health span was probably a better way to say that. And it's very, very individualized, right? So we are all different on that scale. Some of us are, just a little bit, some of us like this, and it may have been that way our whole life, or maybe it's changed, right? Maybe over your life, you've become more or less resilient, and that's usually somewhat dependent on genetics and also the choices that you make, right? The choices we make do matter, and we can impact our physical resiliency as well as our spiritual, emotional um, well-being. So our choices definitely matter. Of course, our age matters. When you're really, really young as an infant, you're kind of resilient, but only to a degree, right? You're also very dependent on your mother and your father to take care of you. As we get older, we really gain in resiliency, where your teens and your 20s are oftentimes your peak physical resiliency years. They're also not usually your peak spiritual or emotional years, which is probably a good thing, right? As we lose that physical resiliency, we can gain resiliency in other places to kind of plug the holes for what we may have lost a little bit from when we were younger. But it definitely makes a difference where you're at on the spectrum according to your age. And I would also say, in regards to that, it's important to keep in mind that because we are all on that spectrum, the goal of resiliency is to increase it, right? Because as we increase our resiliency, we can function within that boundary without having an issue. So if our resiliency is this big, right? So anything in between my two hands, your body can adapt and it can handle it. If it gets outside my hands, something happens, right? Something breaks down, something fails. Maybe it's your muscle is torn because it went outside its resiliency, or maybe your balance is good as long as it's within here. But you go outside of that, then you fall, or maybe your ability to handle, an illness, right? You got this much capacity to handle an illness, and if you go outside of it, you get sick. So our goal is to increase our resiliency so that increases our margins for error. So that's really what we're talking about, right? How do we increase our body's margin for error? How can we handle more and not have ramifications from what we're dealing with in our personal lives, our environmental lives? Hopefully that makes sense. So what, from a physical standpoint, what impacts resiliency? Well, your age does. Sometimes it works for you, sometimes it works against you. And so age is a factor. Sleep quality. We all know this, right? Sleep quality is a factor. If you're tired and you're run down, you are not as resilient. Are you insulin resistant? Do you have diabetes? Guess what? Your resiliency shrunk just a little bit, right? So the better controlled your diabetes, the more resilient you are. Do you smoke? Again, decreases your resiliency. Not smoking increases it. How about other diseases? Urinary tract infections, flu, cancer, osteoporosis, all these other disease processes that a person can get will impact your resiliency, right? Shrinking it. Are they well controlled? Increases it, right? More margin for error. That's what we want. How's your nutrition? Are you eating a bunch of junk, right? If you're eating Doritos and Cheetos all day versus good vegetables and fruits, right? That's going to impact your ability. How much protein are you getting? Are you getting adequate protein to recover from your surgery? That's a thing. If you don't have enough protein, you can't have enough building blocks to improve. When we talk wound care, protein's a big factor. Not enough protein equals a slower healing wound. So what we put in our bodies matters, and it will affect our physical resiliency. Our beliefs, right? Back to that emotional side of who we are as humans. Do we really think we can get better? Doggone it, we will, right? There is that part of our body that needs to believe emotionally that we can improve, we will improve, we are strong, we are resilient, and that will affect a person's ability to heal and recover and to avoid illness or injury in the future. There's also just the bad luck factor, right? Sometimes we are hit with bad luck. I have had older adults well into their 70s and 80s, very active out there riding a bike, and doggone it, they got hit by a car. They weren't doing anything wrong, nothing on them. They had every precaution, they did everything right. It was just bad luck. And that happens too. Yeah. And all we can do is do our best to avoid situations that might impact our luck factor, right? Don't ride on the busy roads, stay on the green belt. You're less likely to get hit by a car. And I think genetics should be on there too, right? If you come from a good hardy stock, as they say, that's going to impact your physical resilience, right? How are your genetics impacting your aging? They are a factor, but our epigenetics, that is something that we can control. So, and that's controlled by our lifestyle choices, and those matter a lot. And they matter our entire lifespan, right? The sooner we address them, the better. But anytime during our lifespan, our choices matter. So how can we improve resiliency? Or more importantly, how can you improve your resiliency? Some of this stuff is obvious. You've heard it before, but it doesn't make it less true. That's the important part, right? It does not make it less true. It just needs to be consistent. You need to be able to, you just really need to be able to make these choices and implement them, right? Put it in your daily life. Make a pattern out of it. Regular activity. We all know you need regular activity. It's going to vary from person to person. What you can do, what you can't do, where do you live, how does that impact what you do? But all of us need to be active. And it's not just the amount of time spent, right? That's important. We need to get our time in, that hour of moderate vigorous exercise a day, but it's also how often are you active during the day, right? If you are sitting for long periods of time and you're not being active, that is a problem. There's really good research now that shows that it doesn't matter how much activity you have. You could do 4 hours of vigorous activity in the morning. If you sit the rest of the day, that will increase your risk factors for stroke, heart disease, blood clots, and basically decrease your physical resiliency. So yes, you need that vigorous activity. It's really important, but you need regular activity throughout the day, and don't sit. Sitting more than 2 hours at any one period of time becomes detrimental to your health. Strength. Strength is a big thing. It's a really big thing, especially for the older adult. We need to maintain our strength. All of our activities of daily living are predicated on the fact you have the strength to do them. If you can't stand up from a chair, or if you can't get off the toilet, it becomes really difficult to manage your activities of daily living. So having that strength is important, right? It gives us physical resiliency. One of my people I like to listen to on the internet is Mark Ripito, and he's famous for saying, stronger people are just harder to kill. And it's kind of a crass way of saying the stronger you are, the more physical resilient you are. So increasing your strength. How we do that varies from person to person. What I can do will be different from what you can do, but what does matter is you're doing. You've got to do something. So strength training is critical. Range of motion, right? The older we get, we do get a little bit stiffer. The way our tissues are designed is it loses something called elastin over time. And that elastin is that elastic component, right? We lose that. We're just not as flexible as we were. When you're a baby, you are like rubber, right? You can bend, twist, and do all these things. And then as we get older, we lose that capacity to bend and stretch like we used to. However, you have to maintain what you have, and it's going to vary from person to person, right? So we want a joint to go through its full range of motion on a daily basis. This helps keep that joint surface coated in its normal lubricant, and that lubricant also has nutrients, and it keeps the stiffness away. It helps prevent arthritis. So it's really important that you maintain that range of motion. It can be through yoga, stretching, tai chi. That part doesn't matter that much. It's the consistency. It's the consistency that matters, right? Keep moving. Back to sleep, right? How many of us struggle with sleep issues? Especially if you watch too much TV. Get away from the news, right? We need to calm our minds. We need to have those naps. We need to have good sleep. Good sleep is where your brain recharges, right? It has its own cleansing procedure. And if you don't get to deep sleep, your brain is not going to clean itself out the way it needs to stay healthy. There's more and more research on Alzheimer's and dementia and how the lack of good sleep negatively impacts or increases your risk for those conditions. So sleep is so important. If you can't sleep, this is what I tell my clients, if you can't sleep, you can't heal. It's that big a deal. You've got to sleep. So prioritize your sleep. Do what you have to do. Get off your devices, read a good book, and take a nap once in a while too. I wish I could take more of. We've talked about healthy eating. What you put in makes a difference. You got to have those building blocks. We can't eat junk, right? So good food matters. Good food really does matter. And depending on where you're at in your health status, your diet has to change. So are you getting enough protein? Are you getting enough vegetables? Do you need to avoid carbs because you're insulin dependent or insulin resistant, I should say? All those things matter. So a healthy diet does vary from person to person, but I can tell you one thing, a healthy diet is not found in a box. So we need to eat more natural foods. We need to get adequate vegetables, adequate protein intake, and it will make a difference. And then of course, talk to your physician and your providers on what's the best diet for your particular health status. Relationships. This one is very, very interesting because there's a lot of research on this, and a person with healthy relationships is just more resilient in all areas of their life, right? So the people you are around and that support system matters. If you are feeling lonely, depressed, without friendships, that increases your risk of heart disease, stroke, heart attacks. And it's really, this was really a good study that I have up on this screen, and it really demonstrates the importance of having those healthy relationships. So those, and again, there's a lot of research on this, those that have a good support system live longer and they live healthier, right? Increased health span along with that lifespan. So it's something to take note of, and it's something to take serious. Our weight matters. If you're too heavy, you're not as resilient as you would be, right? So maintaining that healthy weight goes back to how much are you moving? What are you eating? How are you living your life? And we need to make sure we maintain the healthy weight. It will vary from person to person. Some people are going to be stockier build. Some people are a thin build, but we need to watch that healthy weight for you as a person. And I think your medical providers are really attuned to this, and it's something that you can speak with them about to find out where should you be for your current situation, because that also matters. Okay, so just some really important, I think, take-home messages is that physical resiliency, it's a sliding scale, right? This is not like you're set in stone. You're always right here. It will vary back and forth depending on what's going on. Have you had 3 nights of bad sleep? Less resilient. Did you get the flu and just now recovering? Less resilient. Did you end up in the hospital, pneumonia, urinary tract infection, whatever it might be? Less resilient. So your goal is to increase that resiliency, right? Do the things you know you need to do to increase that resiliency. So that means improve your nutrition. That means move more. That means exercise, strength training, balance training, right? Increase that resiliency. Stay consistent with it, and realize that there are times where it's going to wax and wane. And so whenever you see that resiliency start to come in, how can you impact it? Let's say you had a surgery and you know your resiliency is down. Okay, you're working on getting it back up. What else can you do, right? How can you take those years of experience to make the other parts of yourself more resilient? We call our friends, right? Let our friends help. Have that relationship. We might want to spiritually be more involved, right? All those things will impact the physical resiliency too, right? So that as a person, that whole person, you are becoming more and more resilient. And then whenever you see a fluctuation in the negative, how can you impact it, right? And it doesn't always have to be what you can do physically right that second, because there might be a reason why you can't impact that yet. So let's address the other aspects of resiliency and do more on those things that you can control. Do you need to rest more? And then start plugging away at what you need to do physically. Okay. And we hear this cliche a lot. Don't let perfection be the enemy of better, right? None of us are perfect. None of us are going to do it right all of the time. Maybe Jack LaLanne, right? Maybe he had it right all the time, but the rest of us not going to have it right all the time. So can we just do better? That's all we're asking for, right? A little bit better, a little bit more strength training, a little bit more balance work, a little bit more yoga, a little more vegetables, right? A little more green beans, whatever it might be. A little more relationships with those that we care about. That will make a difference, because the ultimate goal here and the real take-home message is lifespan is something we are all striving to increase. But with lifespan, we need health span. And when you can combine a good lifespan with a good health span, that's how we age well. And I think our goal, for most of us anyways, is to age well. Whatever that might mean for you, we want to age well. So hopefully you learned something about physical resiliency, how that impacts your ability to age well, and some strategies that you can start with right now to improve that physical resiliency, right? Strength training, balance, cardiovascular exercise, being more active more frequently during the day, being consistent, engaging with others. There's all these strategies, and they can look different for everyone, but when you combine them together, it will make a difference for you. So thank you very much for joining me. I've really enjoyed our time, and I wish you all the best and healthy aging, everyone. Thanks.